It all starts with what looks like a typical superhero rescue until everything goes horribly wrong. Huey, just a regular guy, loses his girlfriend when a speedster named A-Train runs straight through her, right in front of him. These heroes are part of an elite group known as the Seven: Homelander, the all-powerful leader; Queen Maeve, his second-in-command; the Deep, ruler of the seas; Black Noir, the silent enforcer; Translucent, the invisible one; and A-Train, the fastest man alive. Together, they're owned and managed by a corporation called Vought International. So, after the tragedy, Huey refuses Vought's attempt to buy his silence. And at the same time, we meet Annie, who joins the Seven as Starlight after a previous member called Lamplighter steps down. But her dream quickly begins to fall apart when Deep coerces her into something she never wanted just to keep her place on the team. Not long after, we're introduced to Billy Butcher, a ruthless vigilante obsessed with taking down superheroes, especially Homelander. Then he recruits Huey, pulling him into his world. As Huey gets deeper involved, he crosses paths with Annie. But things change when Translucent discovers what they're up to and Butcher steps in, taking the soup out of the equation. Meanwhile, Homelander brings down a plane carrying a mayor who tried to blackmail Madeline Stillwell, Vought's vice president, over a mysterious substance known as Compound Vi. Later, Butcher and Huey take Translucent to Frenchie, a weapons expert who tries to figure out how to deal with him. But nothing works at first. Then, Butcher meets with CIA agent Susan Raynor, asking for access to files tied to someone named Mallory, but she refuses. On the other side, Annie tries to do real good as a hero, only to realize everything she does is controlled by Vought's image. And Homelander starts searching for Translucent, who's been missing for far too long. Eventually, Frenchie figures out the only way to stop the invisible hero by placing an explosive inside his body. But before he's gone, Translucent reveals something important. A-Train was high the day Huey's girlfriend lost her life. And Huey hesitates, but in the end, he presses the button. After everything that happened, Huey gets pulled even deeper into Butcher's world. They bring in Mother's Milk, and together they discover something huge. A-Train has been using Compound V to boost his performance. So Butcher wants to expose all soups before they officially join the military, but he needs proof. Then he finds his chance during a race where A-Train uses the substance again to win. Following the trail, they realize A-Train's girlfriend has access to Compound V, so they use her as an informant, taking advantage of the fact that A-Train doesn't even recognize her as his girlfriend in public. Meanwhile, at Vought Tower, Homelander shows Madeline what's left of Translucent, along with a message from Butcher. "I'm coming for you." Now calling themselves the Boys, the group uses the information to track down a hidden facility where they discover Kimiko, a woman experimented on with Compound V, giving her superhuman abilities. Frenchie frees her, but they quickly realize she's not the only one. Vought has been creating powered individuals by force. At the same time, A-Train is hunting her down to erase any trace. Then Frenchie manages to find Kimiko again, but A-Train shows up and tries to take her out. So Frenchie creates a distraction and tries to calm her down, but when she lashes out, Butcher steps in with a gas attack. Meanwhile, Huey and Annie keep growing closer. And in one of the most shocking moments, Homelander and Maeve attempt to save a hijacked plane but fail. Instead of rescuing the passengers, Homelander walks away, forcing Maeve to do the same. Then he uses the tragedy to push his agenda, getting soups into the military. Weeks later, at a Christian event where Starlight is supposed to deliver a scripted speech, Huey uncovers key information about Compound V. At the same time, A-Train discovers that his girlfriend betrayed him and eliminates her. And he also finds surveillance footage of Frenchie. Back at the event, Annie goes off script and publicly reveals what she went through inside the Seven, exposing Deep and Vought's dark side. So Huey comforts her, sharing what happened to Robin, and they start to truly connect. But Butcher and his team uncover something even worse. Compound V is being used on babies to create superhumans. In that moment, Frenchie realizes Black Noir is coming after him. And although the team tells him to leave Kimiko behind, he chooses to set her free. So she ends up protecting him. And when it looks like she won't make it, her regenerative powers kick in and becomes part of the Boys. Then the team discovers that Vought has been smuggling Compound disguised as vaccines, creating superpowered babies for years, while Annie starts pushing back against the system, and Madeline forces Deep to publicly apologize and sidelines him for a year. Later, Butcher finally reveals Huey his true motivation. Homelander crossed a line with his wife Becca, and she disappeared soon after. Meanwhile, with the help of a telepath named Mesmer, Frenchie and MM learn that Kimiko was taken by terrorists and that Vought has been creating super-terrorists to justify militarizing soups. But everything falls apart when Mesmer betrays them, exposing the group to Homelander. And in the middle of all this chaos, Huey and Annie share their first kiss. So, the next day, Homelander starts suspecting that someone is targeting soups from the inside and accuses Starlight. But Maeve steps in to defend her. Soon after, A-Train calls Huey, revealing he has his father and that Mesmer was the one who sold them out. Then Butcher deals with Mesmer, while Huey uses Compound as a distraction so Kimiko can take A-Train down, leaving him seriously injured. Meanwhile, Homelander starts connecting the dots and uncovers the truth about Becca. After what happened between them, she became pregnant and Vought covered everything up, claiming both she and the child were gone. At the same time, Butcher tries to hand over everything to Raynor. But when he points fingers at Vought and Madeline, he learns something new, the existence of a super terrorist. And on the other hand, Annie, feeling betrayed, confronts Huey and things between them fall apart. So as the days pass, the Pentagon classifies Compound V as a controlled substance and labels the boys as fugitives. Then, with nowhere else to go, Butcher takes Huey to meet Mallory, the former CIA deputy director and original founder of the group, but she refuses to get involved. Meanwhile, Homelander reveals to Madeline that he secretly created the super terrorists, but when she tries to keep him under control, a misstep leads him to uncover the truth about Becca. Huey, on his side, tries to fix things with Annie, but the trust is broken. Still, they end up fighting side by side against A-Train, who collapses from a heart condition. At the same time, Butcher kidnaps Madeline to lure Homelander and finally get his revenge. But things don't go as planned. Homelander ends Madeline and then saves Butcher from his own explosion, only to show him the truth he's been chasing all along. Becca is alive, and she's raising Homelander's son. Sometime later, the boys are now on the run. Butcher has gone missing, officially blamed for Madeline Stillwell's passing, while Annie and Huey keep in secret contact. Together, they plan to blackmail Gecko, a Vought test subject, into stealing a sample of Compound V as proof for the CIA. Meanwhile, Homelander becomes even more controlling inside Vought, tightening his grip on everything. At the same time, Huey, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko discover a telekinetic super terrorist is on the loose. But when they try to report it to Raynor, she's suddenly taken out in a shocking way by an unknown homicidal, escalating political pressure around Supes in the military. And just as tensions rise, Homelander faces a new challenge inside Vought when CEO Stan Edgar brings in Stormfront without his approval. Then, unable to intimidate him, Homelander returns to Becca's home to see his son Ryan. Meanwhile, Frenchie reaches out to Butcher, trying to pull the boys back together. But Butcher, trying to piece together how he ended up at Becca's doorstep, makes a deal with Mallory to capture the telekinetic soup in exchange for help finding her. At the same time, Becca agrees to let Homelander see Ryan on the condition that Butcher is allowed to stay alive. Meanwhile, the boys discover the telekinetic is actually Kenji, Kimiko's brother, and they manage to stop him after a brutal confrontation. Deep on his side is trying to recover from his personal downfall, while Stormfront quickly rises in popularity inside the Seven. Then, A-Train wakes up from his coma and immediately threatens to expose Annie's connection to the boys, but she stands her ground, knowing exactly what he's done with his girlfriend. And Homelander begins stepping into Ryan's life, trying to shape him into his image, though his patience quickly runs thin. Meanwhile, Maeve reconnects with Elena, but fears what will happen if Homelander discovers the truth. Later, Annie uses Gecko's sample to expose the truth to the media. Compound V is the source of superpowers. This is a massive win for the boys and a financial disaster for Vought. But in response, Stan Edgar sends the Seven after Kenji when his location is discovered, interrupting the boys' attempt to move him to a CIA safe house, and Kenji escapes during the chaos. In the chase that follows, Stormfront ignores Homelander's orders and takes Kenji out, while also causing a public massacre and later framing Kenji for it. At the same time, A-Train suffers a serious health episode due to his Compound V abuse, and Starlight's identity is nearly exposed. So, for all of this, Edgar uses the incident to push the narrative that soups are still necessary for national security. Once again with Butcher, Mallory gives him new intel. A soup named Liberty, and the location of Becca. Then, Butcher sends Mother's Milk after Liberty while he infiltrates the facility where Becca is being held. However, Becca refuses to leave, not wanting to abandon Ryan. Meanwhile, under Homelander's pressure, Annie joins Huey and MM in the investigation into Liberty, and they uncover the shocking truth. Liberty is actually Stormfront, a decades-old soup linked to a racist attack in the 1970s. At the same time, Homelander grows increasingly unstable due to Stormfront's rising popularity. So, he removes A-Train from the Seven and discovers Maeve's relationship with Elena. But, public outrage explodes when a video surfaces of Homelander taking a civilian life in cold blood. Just for that, Stormfront helps him recover his image, and the two begin a relationship. Meanwhile, Butcher plans to walk away after failing to bring Becca back, but Huey and MM refuse to let him quit. In that moment, they realize they're being followed by Black Noir, but manage to survive when Butcher blackmails Stan Edgar with information about Ryan. Annie, on her side, discovers Stormfront has ties to Edgar connected to a psychiatric facility, and soon after, she and Stormfront clash over the Compound V leak. At the same time, Maeve confides in Elena about her plan to take Homelander down, even recruiting Deep as part of it. Later, MM, Frenchie, and Kimiko infiltrate a psychiatric hospital and discover patients affected by Compound V. There, Frenchie recognizes the administrator, former Seven-member Lamplighter. He was responsible for the tragedy involving Mallory's grandchildren, which led to the original breakup of the boys. So, forced to confront the past, Lamplighter reveals Vought's goal, stabilizing Compound V in adults. Then, Mallory ultimately chooses to spare him, seeing him as someone destroyed by guilt rather than an active threat. Meanwhile, Stormfront reveals to Homelander the truth. She was the first successful Compound V subject, the widow of Frederick Vought and over 100 years old. At the same time that Maeve secures footage of Homelander abandoning the plane incident, giving her leverage. On the other hand, Congresswoman Victoria Newman organizes a public hearing against Vought, with Lamplighter as a key witness. And after Vought discovers Annie's betrayal, Hughie convinces Lamplighter to cooperate with them instead. Meanwhile, Homelander and Stormfront manipulate Ryan, isolating him from Becca and pushing him to embrace his powers. And Butcher is forced into a painful reunion with his father, uncovering more of his past. He then seeks out Dr. Vogelbaum to testify in the hearing that could bring down Vought. However, Lamplighter chooses to pass away due to overwhelming guilt. Soon after, Annie is attacked by Black Noir but is saved by Maeve, who distances herself again from Elena. And during the hearing, everything breaks down when the same homicidal behind Raynor's passing eliminates the witnesses, including Vogelbaum. Then, Butcher learns from Becca that Ryan has been taken, and he strikes a deal with Stan Edgar to help Vought in exchange for getting the boy back. But he breaks the deal and attempts to rescue both Ryan and Becca from Stormfront. So, during the confrontation, Ryan severely injures Stormfront, but also accidentally harms his mother, who tragically passes away. In the end, Butcher spares Ryan when the boy chooses him over Homelander, and Maeve then uses the plane footage to force Homelander to back down and let them go. So, with Stormfront's Nazi past exposed, Edgar shuts down the Compound V program, the boys are cleared of all charges, and Annie is reinstated into the Seven. But in the final moment, Victoria Newman rises in Congress, revealed as the mysterious homicidal responsible for the head explosions all along. 1 year after the Stormfront scandal, the boys are working as contractors for Victoria Newman's newly created Office of Superhero Affairs, tasked with keeping Supes under control, with Hughie acting as their liaison. Meanwhile, Stan Edgar appoints Annie, now publicly dating Hughie, as co-captain of the Seven in an attempt to repair Vought's reputation. At the same time, he tries and fails to sell V-24, a temporary variant of Compound V that grants short-lived powers, to Defense Secretary Robert Singer. Elsewhere, Maeve secretly teams up with Butcher and asks him to look into Payback, a disbanded team of Supes once led by Soldier Boy, who mysteriously vanished. She hopes they can find a way to bring down Homelander for good, even handing Butcher V-24 vials, which he seriously considers using. That same night, Hughie accidentally discovers Newman's powers, but she has no idea he saw anything. While the rest of the group digs into Soldier Boy's past, Hughie visits the Red River Orphanage for Powered Children and discovers that Newman is actually Edgar's adopted daughter. Meanwhile, Frenchie and Kimiko confront the Crimson Countess, but she manages to get away. After learning about Newman's abilities, Butcher takes V-24 and goes after Gunpowder, a former member of Soldier Boy's team. Before things end, Gunpowder reveals that Soldier Boy disappeared in Nicaragua during a CIA mission led by Mallory. At the same time, Mother's Milk rejoins the group, driven by his need for justice after what Soldier Boy did to his family. Back on the corporate side, Homelander finds out Stormfront has passed away and spirals during his birthday event. He delivers a chaotic speech presenting himself as the world's savior, openly challenging Vought. Following his speech, Homelander's popularity skyrockets, giving him even more freedom from Vought's control. Feeling untouchable, he pressures Annie to bring Deep back into the Seven and forces her into a public act, posing as his new partner. Meanwhile, Mallory reveals the truth about Payback's Nicaragua mission. The team was ambushed, Black Noir was left severely injured, and Soldier Boy was supposedly taken out by a Russian weapon. But Butcher, furious at Mallory for hiding this, later lashes out and sends Ryan away, then orders Frenchie to contact Little Nina, his former boss, to arrange a trip to Russia. They strike a deal with Nina. She helps them reach Russia in exchange for a target being dealt with. During the mission, Hughie learns about V-24 and asks Butcher to try it. But when Butcher refuses, Hughie secretly takes a dose himself to help stop Russian soldiers guarding a hidden lab. There, they discover Soldier Boy is still alive, but he releases a massive blast that seriously injures Kimiko and escapes. At the same time, Newman betrays Edgar, accusing him of corruption, and receives a sample of Compound V from Homelander, which she injects into her daughter Zoe. Annie also recruits Maeve and Alex, a Supe in training and her ex, to stand against Homelander. Alex even tries to bring A-Train into the plan, but Homelander finds out, eliminates Alex, and confronts Annie with his body, threatening Hughie if she doesn't comply. So, Frenchie rushes Kimiko to the hospital, where he learns she has lost her powers. But right after, Frenchie is taken by Nina. Huey, on his side, confesses to Annie that he used V-24, deeply disappointing her, while Maeve delivers more V-24 to Butcher, and they spend the night together until she is captured by Black Noir and Homelander. A-Train, meanwhile, forces a soup named Blue Hawk to publicly apologize for his violent actions, but the situation spirals into chaos, leaving several people hurt, including A-Train's brother. Back in the US, Soldier Boy accidentally triggers another blast, drawing attention. So, through a former Vought executive known as The Legend, the group learns Soldier Boy is hunting the Crimson Countess. He finds her and brings her down for betraying him, and Butcher ultimately decides to team up with him, with Huey's support and Annie's opposition. Shortly after, Deep and Homelander discover that Soldier Boy has taken out the Crimson Countess, causing Black Noir to remove his tracking chip and disappear. And Nina also captures Kimiko and Frenchie's ex, Cherie, forcing Frenchie to choose who to sacrifice, but Kimiko breaks free and takes down Nina's men while Nina escapes. On the other hand, Newman reveals her abilities to Annie and proposes an alliance, but Annie refuses. Meanwhile, Butcher and Huey help Soldier Boy track down his old team in exchange for taking down Homelander, leading them to the TNT Twins' mansion during a chaotic soup gathering. But Soldier Boy accidentally unleashes another explosion that wipes out the twins and several guests. They then confront Homelander together, but he escapes, and A-Train manages to stop Blue Hawk but suffers a serious heart collapse. So, amid all chaos, Annie, disillusioned, leaves the Seven and publicly calls out Vought, Homelander, and Soldier Boy. Later, Black Noir, hiding in an abandoned pizzeria, revisits his past with Soldier Boy through hallucinations of his old team. It's revealed that Payback helped set up Soldier Boy in Nicaragua, handing him over to the Russians due to growing resentment toward his abusive leadership. Then, A-Train survives thanks to a heart transplant from Blue Hawk, while Butcher, Huey, and Soldier Boy later track down Mindstorm, who traps Butcher in painful memories of his childhood and his brother Lenny's passing. Huey manages to free him, and Soldier Boy takes Mindstorm out shortly after. Annie, on her side, learns that repeated doses of V-24 are deadly, and Homelander confronts her over her public accusations, but she secretly records him confessing his crimes and releases it online. Soon after, Frenchie steals V and restores Kimiko's powers, and Annie warns Butcher about the danger of V-24, but he hides it from Huey. Meanwhile, Soldier Boy calls Homelander and reveals a shocking truth. He is his father. So, Homelander tries to reconnect with Ryan, and Maeve escapes Vought, reuniting with the group. Later, Homelander takes out Black Noir for hiding the truth about Soldier Boy, and the final confrontation begins when Butcher and Soldier Boy join forces with the others, but Ryan steps in to defend his father. At that moment, Soldier Boy turns on him, forcing everyone to fight him instead. Maeve ultimately stops him with a massive explosion, and both are seemingly gone while Homelander escapes with Ryan. Then Maeve is later declared missing, though she is secretly alive but powerless, while Butcher's condition worsens due to V-24, and Annie officially joins the boys. On the other hand, Soldier is placed under government custody, and Newman becomes Singer's running mate after Deep removes her political rival. So, in the end, Homelander and Ryan attend a rally where Homelander publicly takes down a Starlight supporter in front of Ryan. Shockingly, the crowd and even Ryan himself seem impressed, leaving everyone questioning what kind of future Ryan is heading toward. We kick off the season at a high-profile event where Victoria Newman is celebrating her rise to the presidency, while the boys sneak in with a plan of their own. But things spiral fast when Homelander shows up with Ryan and immediately corners Butcher, reminding him he's got 6 months left to live. At the same time, as the team tries to sabotage Newman, her daughter suddenly turns on them, forcing a frantic escape. And Huey ends up face-to-face with Newman, who offers him a truce while quietly threatening him before walking away. After that, Mallory blames Butcher for the mission going south. Butcher then reunites with Joe Kessler, an old CIA contact of Butcher's, after years apart, and Kessler pitches him a new strategy against Homelander. Still, trust inside the group is completely broken, and Butcher secretly starts negotiating with Newman behind their backs. Meanwhile, Homelander brings in Sister Sage as the newest member of the Seven. She's literally the smartest person on the planet, and she quickly starts shaping a twisted plan to control public perception. The idea is to manufacture chaos, pin crimes on Starlight's supporters, and paint Homelander as the world's only savior. So, that night, Ryan starts to worry about Butcher, while A-Train warns the new Black Noir not to question Homelander. Huey, on his side, stays at his father's hospital bedside, and Annie begins to face growing public backlash. Later, the boys regroup, and Butcher finally admits he doesn't have much time left. Then, M gets furious about the lies and kicks him out. Still, Butcher reveals something bigger. The attacks on civilians weren't random at all, they were orchestrated by Sage. At Vought, preparations begin for Ryan's public superhero debut, while Sage, being watched by the boys and Butcher, teams up with Firecracker to manipulate public opinion even further. A-Train later hands Huey and Annie evidence that could expose the Seven, as a quiet thank you for not ruining his life in front of his family. But Ryan's debut goes horribly wrong when he ends up taking a man's life in front of the crowd. At the same time, the boys are discovered by Sage at a convention, leading to a tense confrontation, though she ultimately slips away. Annie then tries to repair her public image while Huey clashes with his mother, who suddenly reappears and tries to claim a place in their lives now that his father is seriously ill. Meanwhile, Homelander unveils new members of the Seven, and Butcher, working with Kessler, begins plotting to kidnap Ryan, luring him in for one last meeting. So, Sage tightens her grip inside Vought and grows suspicious that Deep stole the files about the earlier attacks. On the other hand, pushes A-Train harder to cooperate with them, and Annie infiltrates Vought and confronts Firecracker, who reveals that Annie once destroyed her life through false rumors years ago. As the Seven meet with Newman to secure an alliance, Huey and now working with A-Train, discover Sage's true endgame: eliminate Starlight to destabilize the government, bring down Singer, and push Newman into power. Once in control, Newman would publicly reveal she's a Soup, allowing Soups to take over decision-making entirely. But Homelander realizes Huey has been listening in and attacks him, though Huey barely escapes thanks to A-Train and returns to the hospital, where he finally makes peace with his mother after an emotional conversation. On the other hand, Butcher fails to keep Ryan close, and when the boy returns home, Homelander lashes out, then decides to confront his origins at the lab where he was created, going there and taking out several people connected to it. Back at the hospital, Huey learns his father won't recover, while Annie agrees to work with Singer to take down Vought, but Sage counters by positioning herself right outside their offices to stay in control of every move. Meanwhile, A-Train secretly strikes a deal with Huey and steals Compound V for his father, and Firecracker then publicly exposes Annie, revealing her past abortion and triggering a massive breakdown. So, Annie loses control on live broadcast and is detained by during the chaos. At the lab, Barbara, the scientist who oversaw Homelander's creation, confronts him, reminding him he always had the chance to escape but chose to stay because he wanted to be loved. However, Homelander ignores her and takes her out. Singer then breaks his agreement with Annie, and Huey attempts to save his father using Compound V, but his mother injects it instead, causing him to wake up with unstable powers. Butcher is eventually brought back into the group and reveals what he and Kessler discovered: a deadly virus designed specifically for Soups, and Newman is somehow involved. Then, the boys track down Edgar, who leads them to an abandoned facility. There, Newman appears and agrees to work with them after failing to locate her husband. At the hospital, everything starts to fall apart when Huey's father begins attacking people with no memory of who he is. So, Huey is forced to make an impossible choice, and he brings his father's suffering to an end. Back at the facility, the group finds infected animals and eventually locates Newman's husband. Then, with his help, they test the virus on the infected creatures. But Butcher and Kessler ultimately kidnap him, forcing him to continue producing the weapon. Meanwhile, the Seven attend a major public event, while the boys infiltrate it from within. There, Black Noir's suit is now being worn by an actor to hide Homelander's involvement in his disappearance, and Huey gets trapped in Tech Knight's hideout, forcing Annie to step in and rescue him. Together, they uncover Homelander's plan: a system of Soup-controlled prisons backed by political allies, especially as Newman gains support from powerful elites. On the other hand, Newman's husband refuses to continue working on the virus, realizing even a single infected Soup could wipe them all out. That moment shakes Butcher deeply. And then the truth is revealed. Joe Kessler has never been real. He's a hallucination created by Butcher's tumor. Back at Vought, Homelander and Firecracker take full control, eliminating Webweaver as a supposed traitor, while Butcher returns and orders Frenchie to keep watch on Newman's husband. We also finally learn Kimiko's silence comes from trauma, as she was once forced to take a child's life and never spoke again after that. Later, Black Noir and Deep attack the boys under Homelander's orders, but A-Train stops them, exposing himself as the leak, and Homelander responds by cutting Sage out completely. So, Newman's husband manages to finish the virus but infects Kimiko during his escape. She survives, but loses a leg in the process, while Butcher collapses due to his tumor. Later, Huey is tricked by a shapeshifter posing as Annie, who steals critical files, and the real Annie is kidnapped. So, the next day, Butcher remains in the hospital, visited by Mallory, and the imposter Annie continues manipulating Huey, even going as far as proposing to him. Meanwhile, Homelander privately loses control while Ryan watches in silent fear. Soon after, Homelander appears in the news alongside Firecracker and Newman, presenting a public alliance, but then exposes Newman as a Soup. And Huey, on his side, discovers the protective files against Newman have been erased. At the hospital, Mallory brings Ryan to say goodbye to Butcher. There, Butcher warns the boy to stay away from Homelander, but Ryan refuses to listen. Elsewhere, Homelander orders anyone opposing him to be eliminated, and the shapeshifter is uncovered, the fake Annie is exposed, and the real Annie arrives just in time to save Huey. So Newman, now fully aware of Homelander's threat, especially toward her daughter, contacts Huey and they agree to work together. Then the boys prepare to deploy the lethal virus. But tragedy strikes at the hospital. Ryan demands the truth about his father. Mallory tells him everything Homelander has done, but Ryan refuses to believe it and realizes she only wants him to help stop his father. So, in a fit of rage, he takes her out. Back at the boys' base, Newman arrives with her daughter. But Butcher, fully consumed by his darker side and influenced by Kessler, refuses to negotiate. He splits Newman in two and takes control of the virus. Then, in the end, Sage plants fabricated evidence framing Singer, who is imprisoned as a new pro-soup president rises to power, cementing Homelander's control over the country. So, the boys attempt to flee, but they're intercepted, just as Homelander learns that Soldier Boy is still alive. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more recaps and comment below what story you want me to cover next. See you in the next video.